What's going on, BODYMORPH Tribe? Coach Chaz here, and welcome to class. Today we're talking about fasting. Going up at the end because of the fasting. Coach Chaz, what's all this fasting caper? What's all this about? Something that we use as a quite an advanced fat loss protocol is something called fasting. Be careful who you utter this to, because the general population are going to think you're mental if you talk about fasting. What I need to make really clear at this point is fasting is not just not eating, okay? My definition of fasting, or intermittent fasting as it's really popularly called, it's an eating schedule. It's defining and being very disciplined with when you do not eat and when you do eat. It's not just flat out not eating. Because if I'm honest, lots of you got that problem. Lots of you already have that problem of just not eating enough. And for you, I'm saying this is not your level yet. I'm only prescribing fasting to the people who prove to me that they've got an understanding of their macros, that they are consistently eating as much as they need for their goal. Once you understand that, then we can explore fasting. But, you know, you can sort of peer in while doing this and sort of learn a little bit about it. But don't do it until I say, I'm watching you. And so is he.
I'm watching you.
We're watching you. So, fasting. Intermittent fasting. Basically, what we're trying to do with this is have a strict period of time where you're fasting. We'll call that your fasting window. And a strict feeding window. So, a certain amount of hours where all of your meals take place. Hopefully you got that bit. Right. So this is how it typically looks, right? A typical fasting ratio then between those two periods of feeding and fasting. We're trying to get people into sort of a 16 and 8 pattern. So it's 16 hours and 8 hours. Okay, so 16 hours fasting. I heard you all go, oh my God, I'm not eating for 16 hours. Hold fire, kiddo. 8 hours feeding or eating. This will seem less scary in a second, and this is the reason. So we want to try and get ourselves into 16 hours where we're not eating, not consuming any calories. I'm going to define what eating is in a second. And 8 hours of feeding. So when we're fasting, we're not allowed any calories at all. Okay, so that is even down to things like Splenda and sweeteners. Shouldn't be having them anyway. You're not allowed sugar. You're not allowed milk. Okay, so in your fasting window, the only drinks you're allowed are things like black coffee, water, green tea, anything that doesn't have any calories in. And it's for this reason. When you're fasting, I'm going to get into more reasons in a minute, but one of the main reasons we can't have any calories is because when you're fasting, we're trying to allow our insulin levels in the body to come down. So normally, when we're just consuming food and calories all the time, right, we're spiking insulin, which is a hormone secreted by the pancreas to take out of the blood all of the excess sugar, essentially. It just shuttles it around the body like a taxi driver for the blood. Yeah. So insulin, when insulin is high in the body, so anytime you eat, or particularly if you eat sugary foods, or lots of carbs, you cannot access your fat stores. Your body's not burning fat. When insulin's high and elevated, your body goes into a storage mode. As I said, insulin, the hormone, just comes and just tells the body to take all of this stuff out. And it's preoccupied with that rather than burning fat. You can't burn fat. So we want to spend 16 hours where we are burning fat, okay, and only 8 hours where we're allowing our body to do the replenishment thing. At the moment, my friends, we have got this the other way round. And that's the problem. We're spending 16 hours in a feeding window. Some of you are like, I only eat for 16 hours. Let me challenge that. If you wake up, let's say 6 a.m., 7 a.m., and then you have a cup of tea, or you have a coffee, or whatever it is, right? And you have milk in it, or sugar, or you have a biscuit, naughty, or you eat a piece of toast, whatever. That is the beginning of your feeding window. So look at this. We get a clock. We'll call that, let's call that just for ease, right? 6 a.m. You start eating there, and you then don't stop eating until, we'll call that 10 p.m. Right? You're like, but I just said I'm not eating for that many times. You are. Because 6 a.m. you start eating, you might not eat then again until 9 or 10 or 12. But what I'm trying to get at is there is feeding happening during this whole time until you go to sleep. So let's call that, I don't even know what the maths is on that, but you're doing 16 hours of eating, and let's say you got 8 hours of sleep then. What's that? 11, 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, 8 hours, right? So, you've got it the other way around. That's bad because you're spending only 8 hours of your night, if you get a good sleep, where you're burning fat. The rest of the time, you are feeding. You were storing fat. We want to get out of that. So hopefully that's a really good motivator, just that bit of information. What we're really going to try and do with fasting, so that coming back to the 16:8 ratio thing, and flipping it on its head, let's say you stop eating your last meal at night at, say, what's that? At, say, 8 in the night, right? 8 p.m. You stop eating. Cue your fasting window. So fasting is going to go all the way around here, right? And then we're going to come to 12 hours when we reach 8 in the morning. 13, 14, 15, 16 hours is at midday. So you stop eating at 8 p.m. and at midday the next day, you start eating. You have breakfast, which is what? Break, fast. The clue's in the name. You break your fast at midday. Now you cue your feeding window, which is going to be 8 hours. You got 8 hours from 12 in the afternoon until 8 p.m. and then you repeat the whole thing again. So you start eating your last calories 8 p.m, go back into your feeding, and the cycle continues. That is what we're going to aim for. Does that make sense? I hope it does. Or is it just all squiggles and wiggles and what the hell is he talking about? Hopefully that makes sense to you. Now there are a couple of rules. In your 8 hours of feeding, we need to relate that now to your macros, your calories, etc. Right? You need to eat all of your meals in 8 hours. You're not eating constantly for 8 hours. That would suck. But let's say you start at 12 and you finish at 8. Right? I want you to have sort of like meal 1. Okay? Maybe, I don't know, like a snack. Meal 2. Right? And meal 3, whatever it is, it all happens within that 8 hour period. That's what we're going to try and get you to, my friends. Now, in the beginning, it's a bit weird because your body's like, what the hell? And you might be like, I'm very hungry. But I promise you, by the time you've stuck with that for a couple of days, you will no longer be hungry at your usual 6, 7, 8 a.m. You will start feeling hungry around 11 a.m. and 12, because your body comes to adapt to this new way of eating, because it's an eating schedule, it's not a diet, and it's definitely not eating. Okay? It's a more optimal way of eating for your goal. Be careful who you tell this to, because if they don't understand it, they're going to call you stupid, they're going to knock you off course. Ask me if you have any questions, I will guide you. But, as I said earlier on, if you are someone who hasn't yet been able to track their food, and they don't understand how many grams of protein and carbs and fats you need, you have no business doing this. Do you get me? This is where you're aiming for. And this is not forever either, guys. It's for a period of time. Like, for instance, we're doing this 8-week fat loss challenge. Something like that. Perfect. Great. Makes loads of goals. We'll improve our health. We'll improve our insulin sensitivity. So it's not up here all the time. Okay? It's all good stuff, but don't do it if you're not ready. Hopefully that made sense. Guys, fasting.